next year. So be praying for that one to come together too. All right, let me start with you in the book of Proverbs, chapter 3. Proverbs chapter 3. Now, every once in a while, I just read through the book of Proverbs just for the sake of refreshing my mind with it. And I'll tell you, there are a lot of really incredible things that you see in the book of Proverbs. That's the book of wisdom, as you know. Those are the statements of wisdom, and the things that you read in Proverbs are intended to help you make better decisions and to negotiate life in a better way. So Proverbs chapter 3 is one of the ones. It contains one of the most well-known proverbs that there is, but it's one of the ones that holds my heart a lot as well. So we're going to start at chapter 3, verse 1. My son, forget not my law, but let thy heart keep my commandments. For length of days and long life and peace shall they add to you. Let not mercy and truth forsake you. Bind them about your neck and write them upon the table of your heart. So shall you find favor and good understanding in the sight of God and man. And then this passage is one that you'll all know. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not unto your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. Be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord, and depart from evil. It shall be health to your navel and marrow to your bones. Honor the Lord with your substance, and with the first fruits of all your increase. So shall your barns be filled with plenty, and your presses shall burst out with new wine. My son, despise not the chastening of the Lord, neither be weary of his correction. For whom the Lord loveth, he correcteth, even as a father the son in whom he delights. Happy is the man that finds wisdom, and the man that gets understanding. Let me pray with you real quick. Lord, I pray that you would speak to our hearts tonight. I pray that you would help us to put things into perspective and keep our minds focused upon you. I pray that you'll help us to let go of the cares of the day, the circumstances that we face, and the things that tend to bind us and bog us down in our walk with you. And I pray, Father, that you would give us a clear mind, a freshness about ourselves, an awakening within our spirit that would allow us to receive your word and to have ourselves grow and step closer to you in this time together. I pray, Father, that you would speak through me. I pray that you would help me to just to let go of anything that would keep me from serving you with all of my heart. I pray, Father, that you would give me perspective. I pray that you would give me insight. And I pray, Father, that you would just allow me to share the things that you desire to be shared during this time together. Lord, I love you so much. And I praise you and honor you for who you are. And I pray, Lord, that you would just allow me to serve you tonight. I love you and thank you so much. For it's in your precious name I pray. Amen. Now I want to go back and look at this a little bit at a time. Let's start with verse 1. My son, forget not my law, but let your heart keep my commandments. Now I always thought it was kind of an interesting idea to say, let your heart keep my commandments. You know, we have a tendency to think things through with our mind. That's really where we make our decisions and where we kind of predict what we're going to do, decide what we're going to do, where we're going to go. We have this tendency to be very logical individuals, and in fact, the idea of wisdom is to take a logical perspective and to put things into a different kind of perspective and not necessarily allow your heart. In fact, a lot of the parts of this particular book tell you, don't go by what you feel. You know what is right, and you know that this is going to bring destruction and damage into your life. So don't do these things because you know better. You know, that's another thing that we say to our kids when they get in trouble. You shouldn't have done that. You know better than that. Anybody else ever said that, or am I the only one? Okay, good. I'm not the only one that would say to my kid, you know better than that. You know better. But for whatever reason, we have a tendency to do what we think about rather than necessarily thinking about what we do. Does that make sense? We do what we think about rather than thinking about what we do. So he's saying in this particular passage, he's saying, obey this with your heart. take it and make it something that you follow with your heart. Now, what you follow with your heart is very different in meaning to you from what you follow with your head. What you put your head into, you're able to predict and logically order things and put it in a perspective that you can comprehend and that you can formulate an action plan. And I think part of what God is telling us in this particular passage is it's not always about the action plan. It's always about following me and being where I'm supposed to be. You know, when you're in a close relationship with someone, you're going to be more prone to do what they ask you to do the way they ask you to do it than when you are at war with them. Have you ever had a rebellious teenager in your house? Anybody ever had one of those? Or a rebellious teenager, when they're at war with you, they don't necessarily do what you say, do they? But now when you get into a good relationship and you're close and there's a love relationship, a connection between the hearts, they have a lot more of a tendency to be obedient and submissive. Wow, those are two really hard words to think about, aren't they? You know, the real thing about it is that the heart connection that we have with the Father, that heart connection determines how obedient and submissive we are too. And I have to say, in my life, there have been times that I haven't been very much of either one of those. There have been times that I've been a lot more prone to make up my own decisions and set my own will in front of my life so that I can say, that's my target, that's what I'm aiming for, that's what I want. You know, there was a time in my life that I thought I wanted to serve at a huge church and be the youth pastor at a great big place and have a staff under me that worked with youth ministry and all of that. I thought that I would want to do that. And I actually went to a church that was over 3,000 people in attendance. My youth group alone was over 1,100. And I had an active attendance of about 700 teenagers. I took 500 senior high students to camp, and I took 350 junior high students. And that junior high students was only 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So I took over 1,000 students to camp one summer. And I was the youth pastor for all intents and purposes. I was it. I was the one. I was making the decisions. I was the one who was running this particular ministry. And I'm going to tell you, it ended up running me. That's what happens in really big places. You know, the bigger the business gets, the bigger the responsibility, the bigger the commitment that it takes, the bigger the time requirements. Everything gets bigger when the situation gets bigger. Everything about it grows. You know what I'm saying? So what it really comes down to is I have to look at my plans and say my plans aren't what matters, and my heart connection with the Lord, how close I am to Him, is going to determine how obedient and submissive I am to Him. So it's not about understanding the words with our head. We can understand those all day long, but again, the problem is we tend to do what we think about rather than think about what we do. You know? We do what we think about instead of thinking about what we do. So it's really important for us to get past this idea of a mental comprehension and being able to make it a logical process, because the things that God does aren't always logical. They're really not. They don't always make sense when you start looking at it and you're immediately saying, well, God, what are you doing? What are you up to right now? I mean, think about how He brought the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. I mean, would you have ever thought that He would send Moses, who had grown up as an Egyptian, basically, although he was an Israelite? And would you have ever thought that He would send him with a stick and said, throw the stick down and let it become a snake in front of the people of Pharaoh's court? And then Pharaoh's court turned around, his magicians turned around and did the same thing and turned their sticks into snakes too. But then look what happened. Moses' snake swallowed up the other two. God is able to do things that we don't understand, that don't necessarily make sense to us. You know, you would have thought if God is going to overtake Pharaoh with the huge army and everything else that he has, He's going to send an army. Just like in the same way how the people thought when the Messiah came that it would be a military individual, a person that would lead an army against Roman oppression, and they would lead them out of that oppression by taking over. But God sent a baby. That doesn't make a lot of sense in our minds. And if we were going to sit there and plot out a scheme that would work out the way that it would, none of us, before knowing about that, would have done the same thing. None of us would have thought to do what God did, to send his own son and put him in a situation to become our salvation. We can't think logically about what it is that we've got to do. Now, there is a place for logic. And understand, I do believe that we have to think things through. We will make far better decisions if we think about what we do rather than doing what we think about. We will make far better decisions, and they will serve us much, much better in our future. But what we've also got to realize is that there are times that with my heart of hearts, because I have a heart connection with the Lord, I have to follow that connection, and I have to become obedient and submissive. Now, that's a hard thing for adults to do. Becoming obedient and submissive to the Lord is a hard thing for adults to do. I find that it is easier for teenagers and children to be obedient and submissive to the Lord than it is for adults. I can tell you in the years of work that I've done in youth ministry, adults are far less likely to believe right off the bat that God's going to take care of a situation. They're far more likely to worry about things. They're far more likely to try to take control of things and fix them or put them in the order that they think works right or the best idea that they have. Adults are far more likely to step in and do that. That's why I'm telling you this tonight. Because I do believe that there probably are at least a couple of folks in here that have a hard time being submissive and obedient because of the heart connection. They've got the head connection down, and they understand that's wrong, you don't do it. But you know what? Sometimes things aren't quite as black and white as we would like for them to be. I mean, if it was just black and white, it'd be real easy. You know, you'd know when to slap someone and when not to. You'd have a good, clear picture of when it's okay. But the real fact of the matter is we don't have it all black and white like that. And there are times that people do things out of what they feel inside. You know, people that have lived a really difficult life and have been through difficult things tend to make life difficult on themselves. People who have lived a pretty easy life tend to be disappointed when life doesn't get as easy as they think it should. You know, what we grew up with has a lot of effect on us. But the real point that we need to understand is that heart connection has got to be the first and foremost thing. So when he says, let your heart keep my commandments, what he's telling you is be obedient and submissive to me because of the relationship that you have with me. And what does that come down to? What that really comes down to is we have to have a depth of faith in the Lord that goes far beyond anything that we've ever experienced before. We've got to trust him like we've never trusted before. Now that's where it gets really hard. You know, trust is a hard thing for any human being to issue to begin with. There are some people who are too trusting. I'm one of those people. I have a tendency to take everybody at face value. What they say, I believe they're going to do. I think that they're, just as genuine as the day is long. I have this tendency to say, they're a good person. They said good things. They mean good, and all of that kind of stuff. I have a tendency to be that person that takes people at face value, and sometimes that gets me in trouble. Sometimes it gets me in really big trouble. But at the same time, I have this side of me that is able to read people pretty quickly. And there are some of them I can tell you in a heartbeat when they're not telling me the truth. I can tell you in a heartbeat when they've got a wrong motive about something. I can tell you in a heartbeat when there's something out of place. Don't always follow my heart on that, because sometimes I want to give them the benefit of the doubt, and I try to take that extra step. But then you've got the other extreme with people that don't trust anyone for anything, that have no ability to trust. And neither one of those extremes is going to be the right way for us to be in relationships with other people. But in relationship with God, all bets are off. In relationship with God, we've got to get to the point that there's absolutely nothing we can't trust him with. And that's where we struggle. That's one of the places that we struggle. There were at least 2 or 3 of the people that are going on this trip to Ukraine that when they first started thinking about it, their first words out of their mouth were, I don't see how in the world I can come up with the money. And I responded pretty quickly, it's not yours to come up with. It's not your problem. If God wants you to go, he'll provide the money. In fact, tonight, we were sitting at the dinner table, and Jim came over and sat down and said, I've raised all of my money. I've met all of my goal now, and it's all in, so that's exciting. And he looked at me and he said, I didn't believe I would make it. You know what? That's how we feel. And it may not be about a trip to Ukraine. It might be about how we're going to make it through the day and get our bills paid at home, or how we're going to keep the electricity on. You know, there are people even in this very church. You might know this already, but I'm just going to tell you. There are people in this very church that struggle with whether or not they can keep the electricity on. They struggle with whether or not there's enough food in their house for their family. There are people in this very church that meet those kinds of circumstances all the time. And you guys have been really good about meeting those needs. I know that you do a lot, and I'm grateful for that. But we have to learn to trust God with every little detail. I preached a message back a while ago about consulting God for everything. We have this list of things that are important for us to pray about. But we have also this list of things that God just doesn't need to be bothered with. And the real truth of the matter is, He wants us to come to Him with everything. I wonder sometimes if it's more that God doesn't need to be bothered with it, or if it's really that we don't want to ask God about it ourselves.